gentlemen, welcome to episode 73 of the Breaking Balls podcast. A proud day for Toyota Camry owners everywhere, Bob, whether they're Uber drivers in the parking lot or the drivers on the track absolutely dominating today.
Yeah, Ad, it is always a good time to invest in a Toyota Camry, I'd say. And of course, Christopher Bell, your big winner here in Phoenix. He is race winner number 4 on the young season. We'll talk about all the action on the track. Plus, we'll even break down the stuff that Fox missed under commercial.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is episode 73 of the Breaking Balls podcast. We are fresh out of Phoenix, and we're heading back east to the Charlotte home of NASCAR. Ad. Gonna kind of reset after the kind of first quarter of the season down here a little bit. Not first quarter, but first 4 races.
The West Coast swing feels empty. I'm dying inside without the 2-mile oval at Fontana, but I guess we could talk about whatever the heck's going on anyway. I'm just kidding. This has been really fun. What a day of racing.
Well, you're right, though. It feels like once you usually leave Phoenix, the West Coast swing is over. You can kind of look at the season and now and say, hey, we got a good idea. But it doesn't really feel like that right now because we've had Atlanta with the second super speedway race almost, and only 2 intermediate ovals. Phoenix is kind of a weird short track. I don't feel like I know quite as much as you normally do coming away from Phoenix, right, Ad?
Yeah, you're 100% right, Bob. But the one thing we do know after today was, holy crap, are those Toyota Camrys fast. I mean, they came off the truck, the entire weekend, whether it be qualifying, practice, you knew they were going to be successful in this race. And, successful doesn't even necessarily begin to do it justice, Bob.
You noticed it right away. I think after lap 2, 1 through 4 was Toyota, and I think 6 of the top 10. And it stayed like that for most of stage 1, stage 2, and then, you had cycles kind of make everything a little weird towards stage 3. But yeah, Ad, I don't think anyone that watched even, a third of that race today could tell you it wasn't a Toyota race. Now, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Usually when that's the case, Toyota seems to find a way to bungle these kind of races. So credit to Toyota, the first non-Chevy winner of the year. It took, race number 4. But yes, Christopher Bell comes back from his break demons of the Championship 4 race in Phoenix in November and comes away wins. His wife was crying again, but for a better reason. And hopefully the next Netflix cameras were still following him around.
Yeah, a little bit of a redemption story, especially, kind of none of his own doing it with the whole can't control the brake rotors other than, trying to keep him as cool as you can. But it gets hot out there in the desert. But yeah, Bob, it just a dominant performance from Christopher Bell. Led a bunch of laps. I know you've got the number there somewhere. But, it just seemed like from the moment that the green flag dropped, there was realistically about 3 cars that could have won the race, and all of them were Toyotas.
Yeah, this was the first ever race where Toyotas had 4 different cars lead 50 laps. Now, ironically enough, Christopher Bell only led 50 laps. But he was not in the front most of the day, Ad. He was one of the few guys that could pretty much start at the rear of the field and work his way back up, no matter hell or high water. It felt like that 20 car was just always passing people today, right?
Yeah, and it was kind of wild because, he wasn't the only Toyota, but it felt like all of the Toyotas had a little bit of problems on pit road. Ty Gibbs had his issue. Christopher Bell had 2. But at the end of the day, the car was just so dominant. The 20 car especially was just so dominant. It didn't matter. One of the cooler parts of this race was watching him get that pit penalty and just knife his way through the field. That car could drive high on the track, low on the track. It could go anywhere. You heard him in the post-race interview just kind of give credit to the crew chief and the guys working on the car and just say, look, it's not every day you get a car like this, and all credit to Christopher Bell for taking advantage of it.
100%. It felt like that, there was not a lot of guys, like I said, that could, go from the back of the field to the front if there was a mistake. Christopher Bell not only did it once, did it 2 or 3 different times there, and that was the only reason you didn't notice him early on in that race. It felt like, Ty Gibbs led the first 40 or so laps. Felt like he had a good car, and then it kind of cycled to where Tyler Reddick hunted him down because he, started toward middle of the field and worked his way up there and slowly started picking apart cars. You thought, oh, this is Tyler Reddick's race to lose. It felt like there was a few guys like that, but Tyler Reddick was probably the fast one today besides Bell.
Yeah, I agree. I thought was actually telling for Toyota as a whole was it wasn't just the Gibbs cars, because even Eric Jones was having a pretty good day early. I mean, they just seemed to really find something. I'm not sure, whether they got together and it was more OEM data that kind of made the success. I know the Gibbs cars showed up with four completely different setups, and I mean, two of the four definitely worked. I mean, it was just kind of wild. To see these types of engineering gambles pay off. And yeah, just the cars they brought to the track were just dominant. I mean, it's crazy.
And like you said, it was multiple different teams. Eric Jones and that Legacy Motor Club 43 rolls off the line, P4 in qualifying. Had a brief moment there in stage one where you thought he could be a dark horse today. Obviously, had some pit issues like most people have had this year, and then ultimately, had his day ended in just, I think, a bitter way. But you mentioned multiple guys, like I said, Ty Gibbs led, I think, 60 or 57 laps. Martin Truex Jr. led 55. And then we didn't even mention, but Denny Hamlin had a car for up until, midway through stage 3. We thought he might be able to sneak a win in here even. It was just one of those days where if you had that Toyota badge in your car outside of probably Bubba Wallace, and I don't even know what happened to the 23 car, but I mean, outside of him and probably John Hunter Nemechek, who's a human wrecking ball to start his new ride in the 42, if you had that Toyota badge in your car, you were probably going to have some speed today. You were a threat.
Yeah, all the confidence in the world. I mean, it can't say. We just keep saying great things about the Toyotas, and they deserve it today. They were really kind of anytime you looked at the scoring pylon that Fox has up on the TV, it just seemed like the top five was dominated by Toyotas all day. Just crazy. I think.
Well, I mean, you said dominate. I mean, there was 312 laps in this race. Toyota led 298 of them. I mean, that is just ridiculous alone. This is the fifth, I believe, next gen race at Phoenix now. And of the first four, two of those were championship races. How many laps do you think Toyota led out of that?
I don't know. I mean, you gotta assume over 50, right? That seems like a safe number.
12 laps. Toyota led a combined 12 laps through the first four Phoenix races. And this is a track dominated usually by a Chevy. And even, Penske stealing the last two championship races at Phoenix. Nope. This was Toyota all day. There was not a single doubt.
Yeah, it seemed like the only bow tie that even was necessarily relevant throughout this race was Ross Chastain. And even Ross Chastain got edged out at the end of the race, which was kind of a funny little Ryan Blaney loves close finishes type of deal, because he just did it again. But yeah, it just seemed like it wasn't so much, who was going to win, as much as the question was which Toyota is going to win this race. And, it's we'll say it a million different ways on this podcast. Holy shit, the Toyotas were fast today.
And, when it comes down to it, like I said, Toyota known for bungling it. They held no doubt. They had guys throughout the day cycling, coming and going. A lot of debate on Twitter about, this new short track package. NASCAR's, throwing darts at the board, trying to make it work. We can get into that in a few here. But the biggest thing for me, and I mentioned it earlier, is that normally Hendrick is the dominant car here. I know Penske has won the two championship races, but historically this is a Hendrick track. And you said Ross Chastain was the lone bow tie that was even somewhat of a factor late in that race. No William Byron, no Chase Elliott, no Kyle Larson. It just felt like whatever Hendrick rolled off with today, and it was clear in practice and qualifying they didn't have it, but whatever they had never clicked today. And I don't know what that reason was.
Yeah, it just seemed like, every now and again you just get off, you unload the car off the truck and you just have a bad weekend. And I think that, Hendrick could probably just chalk this up to having a bad weekend. I will say it was funny early, because it seemed like this was going to be the race that Chase Elliott, kind of came back into form, kind of maybe found his footing a little bit, but quickly fell out of the top 10. And then, William Byron did typical William Byron things.
He had a pit road penalty too, Ad. I mean, it feels like that is the swan song for almost every driver this season.
Yeah, especially today. It felt like if you were kind of in the minority, if you didn't have some sort of pit malfunction or pit problem, it kind of weird. I don't know when that 9 car is going to get it going. I'm not going to keep asking the question. We don't have to talk about it, but it just does feel weird that, every week that goes by, the panic button you need to be circling the drain, Chase Elliott fans. Be very careful.
You did mention, though, pit road and how everyone had issues. There was one guy that didn't, and that was Denny Hamlin, who rolled off on the pole. He gets that first pit box selection to end the pit road. And you mentioned to me even today that, the broadcast made a big, noise about Denny Hamlin in that pit road box. But at the end of the day, there was multiple times where that 11 team came on to pit road, not in first, and they rolled out in first. Maybe that was the difference. I don't know. But, Ad, what was your thoughts there?
I mean, I think it's the one pit stall in NASCAR that I think is almost like an OP advantage kind of. It's one of those things to where if you have the privilege of the number one pit stall at Phoenix, you barely have to, your tires barely roll and you're over the line. So you're going to gain, as long as you have a clean stop, you are going to gain track position. That's just the nature of where the line is. You heard Harvick kind of talking about how he wishes they would make it a little more uniform, and I disagree. I think it's kind of fun. It's, if it were every week that there was this kind of advantage at, in a pit stall, it would kind of get old, I think. But I just think it's fun. It's cool to have, such a sport that started very local and kind of very family oriented. Not a ton of regulation. This just seems like one of those fun niches. That being said, it is kind of interesting that we decide a championship at this track, because it goes against what NASCAR says they want, and that's they want the drivers to decide it on the track. I think that first pit stall, as long as you qualify well and you're in the championship 4, and if you get the pole and get that first pit box, you're in the money. And I mean, Denny Hamlin proved that today, because even though he made adjustments that weren't necessarily conducive to staying in front of the pack, he was able to toy around and stuff like that with the confidence, knowing that he's got that first pit box at today's in the hole.
We could do a whole different podcast on why Phoenix probably shouldn't host the championship race. That the pit box selection is a little blip on the myriad of things that I've got in my chest, but that's a whole different day, Ad. But we might as well stay similar on that topic, because on track, the bracing product, a lot of people were coming in the industry, and a lot of the diehard NASCAR fans that watch the on track product every hour, whether it's practice or not, they kind of had this race circled, because this is the first time that we've come to the new short tracks with this new package, the new Goodyear tire they've been testing, they've been talking about. The drivers came out and they had a whole hour of practice, which, my God, a whole hour of practice for NASCAR before qualifying? Oh my God, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Mercy me. But the comments from the drivers, Ad, was very negative after the practice session on Friday. A lot of the guys were saying, it's worse. It is what it is. There's nothing we can do. It's horsepower. That's all we need. I don't know what the answer is, Ad. I am not the guy to talk to about that, but what did you think of just what you saw today from someone who's watched the last few, short track years in the next gen car? Did you think we got a little bit better? Are we the same? Are we worse? Where are we at?
I would say if anything, we went from like a B to a B plus. But that being said, Phoenix is kind of its own beast. It's a different animal, but the same beast, to quote Kobe Bryant in that beautiful, beautiful Nike commercial. You're right. I think we did have this circled because it is technically the first short track, but I don't know if it's entirely fair to grade the package at Phoenix, just because it is not a traditional short track. I think, it definitely was disheartening to hear your favorite drivers get out after an hour of practice that was, televised, very cool to be able to watch it, and to just get out and have such a negative reaction. And to hear everybody say, this is worse. And, you said it perfectly. I don't know what fixes this. I've never driven the next gen car, but I'll tell you this much. Anybody who was interviewed for the most part and has given their opinion tells you need more horsepower. Chances are you need more horsepower. And it's time we stop skirting around it. Let's give the men what they want. Let's give the people what they want. Let's give the boys some more horses and see what happens.
I think that it's the very popular term is horsepower right now in the garage. The people that don't even know what it does are just saying, hey, add a horsepower. And even Denny Hamlin came out, I think Saturday, and said we could have 750 horsepower in the car by next week, which I think right now they're running around 550. So an extra 200 horsepower, sign me up. Now, the tire's so good, that's a whole different argument of itself. You did see a little bit of a fall off there, but not enough to where it matters in these long green flag runs. The fact that Martin Truex Jr. was able to stay out on 15 lap old tires and not have the field catch him until Christopher Bell had this godlike car come out of nowhere and run him down. It just shows that the tires are still a little bit too good for these short tracks. Now, like you said, this isn't the most typical short track. I mean, I don't think you're going to see them fanning out 8 wide at Martinsville or Bristol. If they do, please go ahead and clip this and also call me and make sure I'm not deceased, because something has happened. Ross Chastain is trying to ride the guardrail at this point to make it 8 wide. But yeah, it's not the most typical thing because it is not that tight short track. They're still going at speeds, but I think at some point there is a place at the table for these kind of races where it's, a comer and goer race. It's a green flag race. Yeah, the aero package isn't what it needs to be. Yeah, Tyler Reddick was held down in 11th behind Todd Gilliland late in the race. There's always going to be qualms and things that we can fix, but at the end of the day, I think we got what we got with this next gen car, and unless they just completely overhaul it, I really don't know what else you can do unless there's these minor little tweaks and quips. And like you said, horsepower is ultimately the next thing to do.
Yeah, I think the one thing that this package did allow for was a little bit of a different strategy. You mentioned Todd Gilliland. I appreciate the gamble that they took today, and tried to pit early and kind of really banking on the caution that oddly enough they never got. Very smooth a lot of green flag racing today, which is good. But Bob, I think the difference between this issue and a lot of issues that NASCAR has is there's no solution. Think about when they were having problems with the Charlotte Oval and they decided to introduce the Roval. Well, guess what? You can't quite, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can't quite make the Martinsville road course. I don't think that's possible. So they're going to have to do something to fix what they've got going on track. And I think at this point, all signs point to horsepower. I'm one of those idiots. I don't even know what that necessarily means. But at the end of the day, if everybody in the sport is calling for one thing, including Richard Petty, I'm going to go with it. We need more horsepower.
Next week, I think, is the key test with Bristol. First concrete, spring race we've had in a few years now. It's been, not quite as attended. The dirt gimmick is gone now. We'll see what that looks like. But yeah, ultimately, Bristol and Martinsville are where this short track package really needs to be nails for NASCAR, because those are the tracks that fans circle on their calendar every year and say, I got to watch that race. And when the last few years, it's been pretty much a snooze fest. It's hard to watch these short tracks. And yeah, the Charlotte tracks, the Kansas, the intermediates are incredible but unfortunately, the casual fan, the ones that are harder to grab, only watch those short track and super speedways a lot of times. So, as much as I love those intermediate races, you got to nail these short tracks moving forward. But yeah, Ed, you mentioned Todd Gilliland. I love seeing strategies like that. I mean, that guy ended up 17th, but we got to give some credit to Todd Gilliland. That man has led in 3 out of the 4 races, I believe, this year now. I mean, I'm not saying that he's going to be a playoff driver, but Todd Gilliland, listen, man, that is a great story. And front row has shown that they've got speed. I mean, Michael McDowell, even with not a great day today, but the Vegas native still pulled out a top 10 and he finished 8th. It just shows that, maybe Ford's not completely dead.
No, I don't think so. I think it was abundantly clear that Ford did have something. They just weren't quite the Toyotas today, because even RFK had a pretty good day. Got some decent finishes from both Christopher Buescher and good old Brad Keselowski back in the top 10.
Is it some kind of law that RFK has to have both their cars together on track 24/7? Because I swear to God, wherever you look at, the 17 is followed by the 6. They are always like holding each other's hand through the field. I'm coming with you, brother. They're
like the Siamese teammates. They just can't necessarily they can't separate from one another on the track. They're either
Siamese teammates.
They're either both at the front of the pack, or they're both out of the race and got crashed out. There's no in between for that team right now, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Chris Buescher ends up 2nd, Keselowski 4th with a little Ty Gibbs sandwich there. Yeah, RFK, we were kind of pushing the panic button last week, because those results hadn't been there. But nice to see them kind of rebound this week. Ford ended up with, I think, 5 of the top 10 in the finishing order. If you watch the race, you probably didn't think that moving through the race. But when the pride of Penske and Joe Logano and the Hunt brothers green machine is wrecked out and, half a lap behind the leader the whole race. You think Penske and the Fords are probably going to be screwed today, but no, it was front row and RFK leading the way for him.
Who'd have thought, Bob? I do have a quick question for you because, I like most people, was watching the race, and the end of stage 2, or I believe it was the end of stage 2, where, NASCAR cuts to commercial, and then all of a sudden just snaps back into things, and Christopher Bell dropped like 15 spots, absolute calamity and chaos, and we got none of the information? I mean, did I miss something?
I mean, you didn't miss anything, Ad. Fox missed a lot today. It was a race where I felt like I missed. It was a race where I felt like I needed to be on Twitter to fully understand what was going on in the race. There was multiple times, and the easiest one to point out is right, 40 something laps in the race. Mike Joy goes, "We're going to go to commercial. Ty Gibbs has led every single lap so far." And this is as Eric Jones is right alongside of him passing for the lead. And then they come back to from commercial, and it's Ty Gibbs 1, Tyler Reddick's 2nd, Denny Hamlin's 3rd, and I think Eric Jones is 4th. Whoa, what happened? Mike Joy comes back and goes, "Yeah, Eric Jones couldn't get the pass on Tyler Reddick while we were going to commercial and has fallen back." There's more that I'll get into, but just was I wrong to think that I'm just scatterbrained watching the Fox broadcast? I feel like I was trying to piece it together myself because nobody would explain it for me.
No, thank God for Bob Pockris, Jeff Gluck. I mean, so many of the NASCAR pundits who do such a good job on Twitter when they're at the track for actually keeping the fans informed, because Fox has one job. It's to make sure that everybody knows what's going on the track and to, have the television presentation go as smooth as possible. And boy, oh boy, were they bad at that today, because it felt like, there was the first commercial break was awful. Coming back from the stage was even worse. I mean, you would expect to learn from some of these mistakes. And, we kind of beat up Fox every week because at this point there's always something. They make themselves an easy target. You've got one job. Just do it a little bit better.
Well, after, we were saying last week, the Bubba Wallace thing, where they failed to really explain fully why Bubba Wallace was being black flagged. It's still out there blocking for Tyler Reddick. You have this week where Denny Hamlin has that spin late or early in stage 3. They go to commercial, and then they come back and they're getting ready to go to green, and we've completely missed the caution cycle. And they explain basically in a 10-second frenzy, hey, Martin Truex Jr. stayed out, 7 guys stayed out behind him, and then Ty Gibbs took 2 tires and the rest of the field's on 4. And you look and, it was Tyler Reddick, Denny Hamlin, and Christopher Bell running for the lead. Hamlin and Bell are running in 20th, I think, and Reddick is like 14th. And you're just trying to piece it together, and they never go back and really. And that was the order ended up finishing him for the most part, was that pit cycle there. They never pitted again, and Fox failed to basically completely explain the final pit cycle and how the field got the way they did. What am I going crazy here?
No, and on top of that, I mean, I would like to say that was the only thing they missed, but why not continue the dog pile here? Kyle Larson apparently had an issue with his tire thread, and we talked about it for 15 seconds and then never went back to it? Why are we bringing this up if we're never going to talk about it? It just feels like somebody in the Fox production broadcast, whoever's in the truck there, needs to take their Adderall, because at this point we can't stay focused on anything, and it's confusing as hell to try and follow as fans. I mean, I am begging you to just make this simple. Just give me the information I need. I don't need to hear Clint Boyer kind of talk about how we get it, Clint. You did drive race cars, and we're very thankful for it. But at this point, stop talking about it. Give me what's going on the track, and don't make this so hard to follow. If I, as somebody who cares about the sport enough to podcast about it, is having a hard time following it, what do you think the new fan is doing? They're probably struggling just the same. And that's ridiculous. You've got to do better. You've got to invite people in and make it easier to understand, not just try and pack very complex explanations into 10-second sound bites. It makes no sense.
Yeah. And I understand the commercials are part of the broadcast. I'm not saying that. It's so poorly managed how they're portrayed. If you see a pass for the lead happening, maybe hold off on the commercial for just 10 more seconds if you can. Maybe that's not how it works. I don't know. I don't get paid for that ad, but I get paid $3 to complain about it. So I'm going to cash in my check and complain about it because I love the sport. And yeah, I just feel like there's moments where Fox is hindering NASCAR's growth. They're the ones that start the season every year. You know, the Daytona 500 has huge ratings and then it slowly starts to go down. If Fox's broadcast was on the tier of, you know, an F1, I'm not saying maybe spend the money, but you know, if they put the product in, it's all about passion and energy too. And I just feel like sometimes it's just, I don't know. I felt like it was hard to follow today.
No, you're right. And I think you're 100% right about the passion aspect. I think Harvick's been a great addition. I think he's really good for the sport. He's doing a lot of very good things in that broadcast, but it just feels like, you know, when it comes to Mike Joy, it just seems like he's anything but joyous to be there. Ha ha. And Clint Boyer, it's like your drunk uncle at Christmas, you know, entertaining enough, but eventually you kind of just want him to go home.
You also don't need to wind him up. And anytime something happens on the track, it's just slowly bubbling Clint up. I think he's great for pre-race. I think he's a great personality for NASCAR. I just don't think he is used in the proper way personally. I don't think he is an asset in the booth currently. I think he's an asset for the production, but not the actual booth. And that's the issue. There's too much Clint Boyer, not enough Kevin Harvick and Jamie McMurray, not enough Larry McReynolds. I want analysis. I need more Larry Mack, less Clint Boyer. How about that?
Yeah, if I needed somebody to just kind of babble on about, oh my gosh, that was so cool, like I could do that in the booth. You know, it's different to listen to a guy like Kevin Harvick explain how difficult this car is to drive. I think, you know, one of the things that what happened off the track this week was, I think it was one of Kevin Harvick's podcasts that he did. He just kind of talked through his thinking during a lap at Phoenix, to where he was like, okay, you're going to see the second cone there. You're going to put your two wheels on the left thing and keep your eyes on the cone and turn the like that type of stuff is invaluable to the broadcast. Rambling and just kind of getting wound up and not even necessarily saying anything that adds value is just that. It's worthless.
Well, you know, what do we know? We're just podcasters, Ad. We're just YouTubers. So, just to, you know, kind of put a bow on this Phoenix talk here, let's go over some of the results. I know we did touch on the RFK sandwich there. Ty Gibbs, though, ended up at P3 today. He was the second Gibbs car in the top 5 there. A good day for young Ty Gibbs. It feels like, you know, he is slowly building something. It may not be pretty, you know, slow starts last year, but in the equipment he's in, it feels like he's due for a win probably this year, right?
Yeah, I think we're building to it for sure. I don't know when it's going to happen. I can't even begin to tell you where, but it certainly feels like the 54's got something figured out. We knew this was going to happen. I think if you tried to convince yourself it wasn't going to, I'm sorry, but you know, I don't think Joe Gibbs was going to let his grandson go out there and fail. And not only that, he's incredibly talented. I mean, it's not even a nepotism thing at this point. I just think he's been wheeling cars for so long at this point. He's just comfortable. And I think, you know, that confidence to know, hey, I can race at this top level with these top drivers. And I think today is another step in the right direction for him. I mean, there was a good portion of this race where I thought this was going to be it for him. But ultimately, you know, Christopher Bell. But great day to be Ty Gibbs.
Great day to be Ty Gibbs. And we mentioned the 4 guys that kind of dominated the race as far as laps led over 50. Tyler Reddick and Denny Hamlin, 10th and 11th. Really not going to summarize the day quite what they wanted. They ended up, you know, getting some stage points. Reddick even, you know, gets a crucial playoff point winning stage 1, but it just feels like another race where Denny Hamlin was faster than his results showed. And same for Tyler Reddick. It feels like that 45 team is either all in or they're all out.
Yeah, I think that's been kind of the slogan of Tyler Reddick's 23-11 tenure is boom or bust. I mean, he's either winning races in the top 5, doing a great job, or he doesn't finish the race. I don't know. Denny, I mean, how often do you see Denny Hamlin self-spin? I mean, that was kind of a hilarious thing for Denny to say, we can have 750 horsepower in the car tomorrow, and they go out there and self-spin. But, you know, I digress because I do agree with the point he was making. But yeah, just kind of seemed like, you know, I don't want to say he ran out of talent, but if it were anyone else, I think we would say he ran out of talent.
It seems like that turn one just gave some issues to everyone. Derek Kraus, Denny Hamlin, just guys who were just struggling in turn one there. But another guy, we gave Chris Bell his flowers of being able to pass the field. When Martin Truex had to pit, late in that stage 3, James Small came on and said, realistically, we could probably get to 6th if we really battled through the field. He got his lap back and ended up getting 7th. So, I mean, look, if you had tires and you had a long green flag run, you could make strides today. And Martin Truex was the sole example of that, I think, today, Ad. But, putting in the top 10 here, McDowell, Briscoe sneaks some forwards in there. Blaney, always is consistent, it feels like right now. He's on a hot streak right now. I think he's just nails it. You're going to get a top 15 performance with Ryan Blaney every week if he doesn't wreck out. But a guy that I think you can give the flowers to, because you called it last week with Noah Gragson. You said an impressive performance. Another one this week. Great qualifying session to get in the top 10 and ran clean laps for the most day in that bright green car. You knew where he was all day. P12 today for Noah Gragson.
Yeah, I had Danica flashbacks looking at that bright of a car. I won't lie to you, but that was kind of the only flashback I got, because Noah ran clean, didn't hit anybody, and finished in the top 10. So maybe the anti-Danica. Anyway, it just seems like, for whatever reason, the change of scenery is really doing him well. He kind of seems like, we could talk about this a little bit later, and I know we're going to, but kind of seems like one of the only bright spots at SHR right now. It's not flashy. It's not, oh my gosh, look at this sexy new young driver, but he shows up every week and seems to consistently finish in the, top 15, even top 12. It just seems like a really good start to the year, slowly just kind of getting points, getting stage points. And he's really laying a really good foundation for himself, especially for a first year at a new team that otherwise, other than Chase Briscoe, not very well represented in the top 10.
Yeah, Chase Briscoe finishing 9th there, but this is his 3rd year, I believe, in that 14 car. You really should see him, in theory, take a stranglehold on the lead driver for SHR, and you're not really seeing it yet. And again, they have their issues over there. Maybe it's the car, maybe it's not the team, but just something to keep, watching forward.
I will
another
say
guy,
this, Bob. It kind of feels like we're headed for a lot of different teams are kind of having a changing of the guard type of season. There's a lot of guys and new drivers, new names, and new places that it's just very interesting to. It's just super interesting to me to consider the landscape, especially with Harvick leaving. I think we already knew there was going to be a pretty big shift in the landscape, but to kind of see these pieces shake out, it's getting interesting, even though it's early in the year.
Yeah, it's early in the year, but a guy like Daniel Suarez, who we've talked about before, he, a foundational piece at Trackhouse, needed a big year, consistent. Again, 13th, beating the entire Hendrick organization, for the record, by the way, which, again, we talked about Hendrick. Larson was 14th. Byron, Elliott, and Bowman had a full sandwich at 18, 19, 20. Hendrick today was just not it. But I'll tell you who was in there. Carson Hocevar, 15th, and qualified the top 10. That old 77 car's got some speed. We'll talk about his future here in a few, but again, just another great weekend for that 77. It's about getting laps and showing speed, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think especially the expectations can't be too high, but at the end of the day, he's still exceeding them because he's finding a way to run clean laps. And as a young driver, I think confidence is so important. And I talked about it with Ty Gibbs, and it's kind of the same story with Carson Hocevar. We know he's got talent. I think it's evident if you've watched any of his Xfinity product, and before that in the trucks. I think he's got talent amongst other things, is what I'll say about Carson Hocevar. But it's very good for him to see him week after week consistently get good finishes for a team that really needs it. And yeah, I think this is a very beneficial relationship for both sides of it. I'm just excited to see how the year goes. Maybe that guy sneaks in and gets a win in his rookie year. Who knows?
And on a day where his teammate Corey LaJoie finally breaks his long DNF streak and wrecks out of the race, Carson Hocevar showing that he's got some talk over at SPIRE being the lead dog. But Ad, just, one guy I do want to kind of talk about here real quick. We're 4 races into the year. Now, I want to say this. It's not his fault, but Austin Dillon has wrecked out of 3 of the 4 races 5 laps in. Now, I know he put some laps in with that beat-up car with the sledgehammer taken to the hood, but RCR, just another banner day over there at the office there. Kyle Busch struggling all day, penalties, couldn't get his car to turn left and right early on in the stage, and then you can't even have Austin Dillon run laps out there. What? I mean, there's not even a guy over there right now at RCR. Their guy is Austin Hill in the Xfinity Series, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, not a I guess there's no law firm in America big enough that can help RCR right now, because Morgan & Morgan, biggest law firm in the United States, plaintiff's attorney's out the asshole, and they simply just can't get that 3-car figured out. And then the 3, Austin Dillon, you're 100% right. We can't really blame him. He just kind of keeps getting swept up in every single big one that we've had this year. Any sort of accident, he finds a way to get involved.
If you qualify in the back, you're going to get caught in some shit. And guess what? He's been qualifying in the back.
Yeah, and I think the only thing he maybe have going for him right now is Kyle Busch is underperforming. I think that's something that we can be honest about. Especially today, it just seemed like between the communications on the radio and just from the moment car was unloaded off the truck, just never had it this weekend. And I don't know. I think you and I both know from watching NASCAR, Kyle Busch is not the most patient driver in the world. So I'm interested to see how RCR goes through this adversity. Obviously, Richard Childress commands a ton of respect, and it's just going to be interesting to see how this relationship continues to develop, because I don't see Kyle Busch being too comfortable with these types of weekends very much longer.
It is fascinating that Kyle Busch is not having a great start to the season right now, because Kyle Busch is historically a guy that the more he's on track, the better he is. And, he's run a few truck races already this year in that SPIRE truck, partnership he's got. He's run practice for an hour at Phoenix. Usually when Kyle Busch gets practice, he's pretty darn good. No, not this week. And
yeah,
maybe it's just, slow start to the season. Maybe the track setups with RCR haven't been there. It just hasn't shaken out. Maybe they'll get to some of their bread and butter moving forward. But this time last year, Kyle Busch had already won a race and was locked into the playoffs. Not so this year. And a lot of time, we're not panicking. I'm not saying Kyle Busch isn't going to make the playoffs yet, but there is something to, keep an eye on moving forward. Is if RCR can get the cobwebs off, because that is not something that they can keep having, a 32nd place finish for Austin Dillon or 22nd for Kyle Busch. You've got, Justin Haley running 24th, 28th every week. He finished 24th this week. You're consistently outpacing them right now with Austin Dillon just because he's DNFing. I mean, the fact that Justin Haley in the Rick Ware car is getting results and Austin Dillon isn't, I'm not saying it's linear, but I'm just saying at some point the season's going to start adding up here.
Yeah, I think these are the types of streaks you like to avoid, especially in NASCAR, because they build quickly. And, I think it's one of those things that every week you don't finish, or every week you kind of mess up the setup or something like that, confidence just starts to dwindle. I think we're really going to learn a lot about Kyle Busch, I think, in the coming weeks, because he's a veteran driver. He's got to be the mature kind of voice of reason in the shop and say, look, it hasn't been great, but let's get back to the drawing board. Everybody get back to work and let's see what we can do. Because otherwise, I mean, this is the type of stuff that happens at the beginning of a year and just snowballs. And, I think we've like Chase Elliott's snowball, for example. I loved, I hate to keep going back to it, but it's just one of those things that as it's the lack of success breeds lack of success in this sport. And RCR is definitely starting to roll down the hill and gain a little bit of traction in the not successful category. So hopefully they can get things turned around.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be something that we're going to keep an eye on here Two more things, really, just to kind of put a bow on this finishing order. One quick one here. They said that Harrison Burton was out there today. He finished 27th. I have no recollection of that. If anyone has a photo or video of him on broadcast, please, Breaking Balls at Instagram. We would love to have evidence that Harrison Burton was out there today. As far as I know, he's a missing person for the last, 3 years, probably.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to the number 21 Wood Brothers Racing Toyota, but if you've seen it, or Ford, if you've seen it at any point, please, for the love of God, contact Breaking Balls. We've been looking for it for the past 3 years. It's kind of like our lost puppy. We think if they may have gone upstate to a farm to live there the rest of their lives. I'm not really sure what's going on, but if you've seen the 21 car, for the love of God, please reach out.
And last but not least, just quickly, I would like to go ahead and do my weekly colleague slander. Not only is their Xfinity program basically tanked now when they were an absolute powerhouse, both their charters are absolute garbage this year. Derek Kraus, a 35th place finish. He got caught up in that early Austin Dillon scuffle on lap 7. And then they have Daniel Hemrick, I guess, full-time in that 31 car this year. He comes out 28th. So, Matt Collig, this is what you get for not keeping AJ Allmendinger in that car full-time this year. You reap what you sow. You were more worried about chasing advertising than talented drivers. And now you've got Josh Williams wrecking out every week in Xfinity. And a to-be-determined driver at this point in the 16 car. So, Collig, we hardly knew you, but congratulations.
Yeah, every series needs a Cody Ware-like figure, and it seems like Derek Kraus is more than comfortable to play the role this year. So, congratulations. That's a hell of a thing to be known for, Colleague, especially when you've got AJ Allmendinger.
Is Colleague the new Rick Ware Racing? My column at Breaking Balls. But Ad, you teased it earlier, and I'm glad that you did because, we're now 4 races in, and yeah. There's definitely some questions, I think, heading to Charlotte now that, we're through those West Coast these West Coast races. And where do you want to start here? Which team? I think that Joe Gibbs is a fun one personally with Christopher Bell.
Like I said, I just think we've got some shifting. I mean, it's the power dynamics of these big teams. I think the one we've kind of harped on the most in the previous weeks was Hendrick. Because, with us talking about how we've kind of got 1A and 1B at Hendrick and then Elliott and Bowman. But I think you're 100% right, because at the beginning of the season, without the racing, especially after the Clash, if you would have asked me who the clear-cut number 1 at JGR is, I think the answer was Denny Hamlin. I mean, he's clearly one of the more recognizable names of the sport. Perennially in the playoffs, it seems like just obviously snake-bitten enough to never win the championship, but Bob, then there's just, you start to look at the numbers, and this is Christopher Bell's 4th season in a row with a win. I mean, made the championship 4 last year. Is there a power struggle at JGR right now?
It's an interesting dynamic at JGR. It's a very diverse lineup. You got young Ty Gibbs, you've got Denny Hamlin, who is the outspoken voice and probably the face of JGR. Christopher Bell, who's the young hotshot phenom, like you said, 2 straight championship 4 appearances. Was it 4 straight years with the wins? I mean, this guy can win on any track, it feels like. And Martin Truex is still there with half a foot out the door, but also has a Cup Series championship and is going to be a Hall of Famer. So, it's an interesting lineup. But yeah, you could make an argument Christopher Bell is probably the guy at Joe Gibbs right now. It's interesting.
It's the amount of races that he's won, too. I mean, not to win 7 races in your career, in his young career to this point, and to have them all come at different tracks. I think that's the part of the stat that really makes this conversation interesting, because, I just think he is the one driver at JGR right now that you can look at and say he can win anywhere. Whether it's a road course, short track, he's got a shot just about everywhere. And I don't know. I think Denny's an interesting one for me because, of course, it's Denny Hamlin. He's an outspoken voice, but he's got 1 foot out the door. He's already owns another team. I mean, he's obviously very involved with what he's got going there. So if you're JGR, do you really have the incentive to kind of push him? I don't think so. And especially when you've got Christopher Bell and your grandson, if you're Joe Gibbs, racing at the same place. It just seems like oddly enough, Denny Hamlin is going to get the short end of the stick here, because not for no fault of his own, just because of some of the decisions and, him owning another team. But I don't. It just seems like Christopher Bell's got to be the number one over there right now.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting argument. I think you could make a case for all three of the drivers not named Ty Gibbs in that stable there for JGR. Another interesting one, and for different reasons, honestly, is SHR with the lineup of Josh Berry, Noah Gragson, Ryan Preece, and Chase Briscoe. Briscoe is the senior there of 3 years. He has been in that 14 car. He's got Mahindra, the flagship sponsor of that team right now. But when you look at it, if you take out the points penalty that they had for those confiscated roof flaps, I believe, was it 2 weeks ago, it would actually be Noah Gragson as the points leader at SHR. In his first year, he's had the speed now with the last few weeks at qualifying, getting results. Maybe it's a small sample size ad, but could you make an argument that Noah Gragson is the guy right now at SHR too?
I think it's, I'm a lawyer. Of course I can make the argument. Just kidding. But no, I think the results are there to the point where, yeah, it's definitely not what we expected from Noah Gragson. I thought he was definitely going to struggle a little more than he was, especially, given the performance we saw out of him at Legacy. I just didn't have a ton of hope for the guy. But
performance, that was, yeah, that you could call a performance. I could call it. He just got out there and is still in turn 6 in Chicago.
It was a performance, exactly. I'm trying to be political here, but
I'm glad you are.
Yeah, exactly. But Josh Berry ain't it. Pride of Hendersonville, Tennessee, stand up. But right now, just simply, it just isn't it. It just, for whatever reason, it hasn't quite clicked yet. Obviously, huge shoes to fill in the 4 car. I mean, in my mind, there was no way Josh Berry was going to have a ton of success this year. But if you're Chase Briscoe, you've got to be feeling some of this pressure, because it's you, like you said, the elder statesman, the guy who's been there for a while, certainly is the member of the team who kind of gets the most media push. You see him in different commercials, especially with Mahindra, different things like that. But as far as on-track performance right now, I don't think you can make an argument for anybody but Noah Gragson, because he's just been that consistent to this part of the year. And it feels weird to say that. If you would have told me I was going to say that, at the second half of last year, I would have probably slapped you in the face, but that's the reality of where we live.
I definitely think it's either Gragson or Briscoe. I think you could make an argument on each, depending on which way you want to look, whether it's long-term future and what you've gotten with the the results right now with Gragson, or if you want to go with the past, and Briscoe Briscoe was close to making a fluky but weird Final Four run a year ago. So
we forget.
It is possible, but that's an interesting team over in the Ford camp. I guess Ford for now, but and then the other one who is Chevy for now. If you listen to our last episode, you may be inclined to think SPIRE might be going somewhere eventually, but add the one that I had circled here. This is the one that even got me thinking of it. Is SPIRE, of course, because they've got the 3-headed monster now with their 2 drivers, Corey LaJoie, Carson Hosfarth, and they've got Zane Smith technically on a lease from Trackhouse for the 3rd car. But man, Corey LaJoie has been the face of SPIRE Motorsports ever since he's gotten there. He's obviously got the podcast partnered with NASCAR. He's a likable guy. Always said if he just was in better equipment, he'd be the guy. And then he's gotten a young hotshot driver alongside of him and is putting in results. And I'm just asking the question, who is the guy at SPIRE?
So, SPIRE to me, and stick with me here, feels like a small Midwestern high school. Corey LaJoie is the stud athlete that from the time he was born, everyone in this small Midwestern town has loved him. And this small Midwestern town is SPIRE. But I think what we're realizing now is maybe he's not as good as we all thought he was, and maybe he was just a really, really big fish in a somewhat small pond. I think that's Carson Hosfarth, to come in and have the early success that he's had. I think he's like the new kid coming in. Dad got a job in the town, so this Hallmark movie if you've seen it once or twice. But comes in, takes all the thunder, steals all the girls, takes all the minutes, and on the basketball team, whole 9 yards. And it feels like that's happening at Spire Motorsports right now because Carson Hocevar, like I said, he's overperforming, and you could make the argument that Corey LaJoie has been underperforming for a very long time. And I think we've given him a pass because we just haven't had an idea of how good that equipment is or isn't because we only have one guy who's driven it. So I don't know. There's a lot more questions than answers at Spire right now, but you're definitely right to have the argument, in my opinion.
I think that's the thing is we've always just assumed Corey LaJoie is this guy with untapped potential and, he's been in a lacking car with Spire, but there's no other gauge in comparison there. And then last year when you had LaJoie jump into that Chase Elliott car in Gateway, now, the circumstances are what they are and it wasn't fair. He didn't perform great in that 9 car. And then Carson Hocevar, now he did blow a brake rotor, but he was running pretty darn well at Gateway in that 7 car for Spire. So it's not like this is just a one-off there. As this sample size starts to grow, I think there are going to be a little bit of questions about who is the guy at Spire. And, Corey LaJoie, who's had, this top dog and unquestioned pedigree at the, as the guy at Spire, as Carson Hocevar starts to, get that racecraft and starts to get these green flag laps at the cup level, man, it's going to be fascinating to watch that development and see if there's, friction or if it's all harmony with a 2-car system over at Spire. I know it's 3, but, Zane Smith is half the time he's not even out there. So, we'll give him credit. It's not his fault, but he's kind of similar to Austin Dillon where he's getting caught up in some of these wrecks early. But, it's fascinating to watch Carson Hocevar because as polarizing as he's been through his truck career, the guy can drive flat out.
Yeah. I don't think there's a question that, the guy's wheeled everything he stepped into. And yeah, the talent is certainly there. I think, I don't know. I think Corey LaJoie's style and just kind of his personality, kind of blends more, kind of breeds itself more to them taking a more cooperative relationship. But it is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on because one of them is performing and the other one is simply stacking pennies.
Man, that is just 2 very different dynamics too. And it could, like you say, it could go well, it could go bad. And I am here for it. The fact that Spire is an interesting storyline in 2024 for me is something that I love the unpredictability of NASCAR, but also, it just shows what time can do. Even in a short period of time, man, things change. Like you said, Noah Gragson might be the guy at SHR. If you would have told us that 6 months ago, my God, where would we be at?
Especially, it's wild. It's cool to see the mix up in the sport though, and just to kind of see, the changing of the guard and to really have this all, just kind of shake itself out. It's going to be very interesting to watch for all the teams that we mentioned.
Absolutely. Well, more of an overall kind of view at Phoenix this week. Obviously, we're not going to have the, head-to-head of Atlanta and Daytona that we've kind of expected the last few weeks. But this was kind of, like last week with Vegas, our good look at what the season's going to look like. And obviously, if this is what's going to be like, I just need to, move my head if you're watching this on video and just let the Toyota screen in the background probably just take up full screen. At this point, could be a Toyota season. But is there anything that we missed in the rundown or anything that happened this week that we need to cover?
No, I think we kind of touched a little bit on everything. If you're Austin Cindric, womp womp. That's all I'll say about that.
Man, who called that? Darn.
Yeah. Oh no, shucks. But
not us at Breaking Balls.
No, simply not us. Couldn't be us. But Bob, what about you? You got anything you want to finish with here?
No, we've made it 73 episodes in. We will be back, of course, on our YouTube, our Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll throw up some clips through the week on YouTube and our Instagram, Breaking Balls. Of course, if you can't get enough of us, we will put all the clips up and everything you need content-wise here at Breaking Balls. Our beautiful faces are available 24/7 wherever you need us.
Amen. Well, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening and watching. Like, comment, subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend. And Bob, you get the last word. Go ahead.
Toyota.